Thank you very much, Denis, for being with us today. And good afternoon again to everybody. The session has started, and Denis, the screen is all yours. You are muted.
Muted. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It's
So
nice to have
let's
you.
start. Starting with the first slide, then we will be talking about Power BI using streaming for real-time data. First, who am I? My name is Denis Torres. I'm a data platform MVP with some Microsoft certifications. I live in Malta. I'm the leader of Malta Data Platform User Group. And you can see on the right side all my contacts. Website, Twitter, LinkedIn, email, and so on. It will be a pleasure to keep in touch. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and follow me. And ask any questions that you would like about this session or the session, any questions that you would like. It will be a pleasure to keep in touch. So, first, we are talking about real-time data inside Power BI. Let me show what we are trying to achieve. So here I have a Power BI workspace, and I'm reading information about RSVP from Meetup. I'm reading online information about RSVP from Meetup. I made just a bit of silly report just to show that I can reach a real-time report, a real-time information. So this report is telling me now, at this moment, what cities are receiving attendees for their events, what events are receiving the most number of attendees, and what's the total of attendees. The total of attendees is already 5,370. The events receiving the most number of attendees are always changing. The events are always changing. And we have many concentrations here on North America, Europe, and in many different cities. There are some cities like London that are a bit highlighted here. But we can see how the events are distributed around the world. Let me edit this report and show one small detail here. There is a setting on the page level that defines the page refresh. Okay, I need to make the streaming arrive in Power BI, but besides the streaming arriving in Power BI, I need to ensure that I'll be able to make a page refresh. So I can configure a page refresh to be done for every 5 seconds, for example. So this is on a extreme point of the solution, on the page of the report, and allowing the page refresh to be done about every 5 seconds. But that's not true, because on this tenant I'm suffering about a limitation. There is a tenant level configuration limited for 30 minutes refresh. I'm very sorry about that, but this means that I will need to hit refresh button from time to time. To really see updated information, I will need to hit the refresh button from time to time on this report. Meetup report 2, loading data, and I can force the refresh, and you see the refresh happening in what we can say real time. Okay, Now that we are seeing the solution that we want to achieve, the solution that we want to have, let's talk about how the solution was built, what steps were built, and let's even build some new pieces for the solution. We are talking about real-time data. Uh, what real-time data? How can we break down the needs related to real-time data? It's easy to break down these needs in two different areas, and these two different breakdowns of the needs of real-time data, they are very important because they result in needs of different architecture. What are these two different areas? One is relational data. Is when our data is getting into a relational database. It fits perfectly in a relational database. But due to business reasons, we need to know exactly what is happening on the business in real time. So the data fits in a relational database, but we need to know what's happening in real time. This is one side of the need. This is one situation that can create the need of real-time data inside Power BI. The other side of the need is big data. When we are dealing with big data, the amount of the data that we receive every time is too much for the relational database. So this data doesn't go to the relational database. There are specific architecture. We don't even call this ETL. We call this an ingestion process. We are ingesting data because it's a huge amount of data. There are many different architectures that can manage this solution, but one thing these architectures have in common is to implement what is called a speed layer. A speed layer in the ingestion architecture is the layer where we will show a real-time data. We will show the data according the data is arriving. And we'll use some visualization tools such as Power BI. We can use Power BI as the visualization tool on the endpoint of the speed layer in a big data solution. The data after that is discarded. Discard the data. We don't need the data anymore. So, uh, what I was talking about, the relational Power BI needs to reflect the relational data. It's easier that on the relational data, uh, Power BI will reflect what is on the database. So we'll get the data more like they are. We will not have many needs of many aggregation summaries or so on. We may need some, not so many. But on the big data, when an ingestion process is in place, I just talked about the ingestion process, what will happen? We need to summarize more the data. So, for the relational database, our need in relation to Power BI is to have a better solution than only keep refreshing the dataset. Auto refresh the page, you just saw we have an auto refresh the page every 2 seconds. But auto refresh the dataset it would be something different. Uh, but the dataset to query the relational database every 2 seconds is something that is not really a good architecture. It's not really a good solution. We should not go with that. So, uh, and in relation to big data, we may need some summary of the data because the amount of the data that we receive is so much that many times we not even record out the data. Many times we summarize the data according some setting of rules We summarize the data according to this set of rules and store the data according to the summary. And on the speed layer side, we'll need some summary to show some summary about what is happening in real time on our business. Event Hub can be a link with Power BI in relation to the relational data. We can use Event Hub to be a link with Power BI. It's an option, but there are some points that may lead to a decision to use or not use Event Hub. We'll talk about that. What is Event Hub? Event Hub is a self-used uh, in Azure to ingest a huge amount of data. We use Event Hub as an entry point for a data ingestion process. So we can use Event Hub as a link to input real-time data inside Power BI, even for data in the relational database. But the relational database may have other options. We may think about them. We'll talk about this in a moment. But on the big data side, we are we are saying that there is already an ingestion process in place. And if there is already an ingestion process in place, probably Event Hub is already in place. If we are building an ingestion process inside Azure, we use Event Hub to make the ingestion process. So Event Hub may be already in place. And this is an example of one architecture that I mentioned, ingestion architecture, to ingest huge amounts of data. Event Hub is the entry point of this architecture. This architecture is called Lambda architecture. There are many people that like other variations of the Lambda architecture, but the core idea is very similar in relation to what you are seeing here. So you have an entry point. The entry point is Event Hub. You use Event Hub as an entry point. Then you have a speed layer and a batch layer. The speed layer has the intention to show real-time data, show to you what exactly is happening at this moment on your business. The event hub may receive application about usage of a mobile app that you distributed worldwide. Many other sets of options may be receiving data from social media, for example. It's a possibility. Event Hub may be receiving social media data. It's a possibility. So, we may receive huge amounts of data on Event Hub, and the speed layer is intended to show what's happening at the moment. The idea of this architecture is that the data of the speed layer is not important. You can discard the data. You show what's happening now and you discard it. It's not important. The batch layer is the layer responsible for storage. This one is responsible for storing what's happening, the events that are happening. And on the batch layer, you can involve many different technologies. This drawing is showing the use of Azure Data Factory and Azure Cosmos DB, but there are no restrictions about what kind of technology you'll be using on the batch layer. Data Factory is a very common technology. Cosmos DB is one option, but Synapse Analytics is another option as well to be used on the batch layer. And why the link there about in relation with Power BI? Because Power BI can also be used to analyze data from the batch layer, but it's a different kind of analysis. From the speed layer, we analyze real-time data, and we need some special features to analyze real-time data from the speed layer. But from the SAS layer, the data is stored. We are talking about regular reports that you make over stored data to show the history of what is happening with our business. So, so our focus here for real-time data, our focus is the speed layer. The batch layer is another thing is related to big data. We don't care about this on this session. On this session, we care about the speed layer. That's our focus. So let's talk about the Event Hub. Since Event Hub is the entry point for a speed layer, so this is the first element, the first step in the ingestion architecture. The first one to receive the data in the ingestion architecture and in control the receivement of the events, ensure that you receive correctly the events and control that you will not lose events. And the event will be responsible to forward these events to other destinations. Event Hub has a set of destinations to where it can forward the events. These destinations will be responsible to make further processing of the events. We just saw on the previous slide that Event Hub can forward the events to a speed layer and a batch layer. Yes, it can. It can forward the events to a speed layer and the batch layer. Multiple forward the speed and storage. What Event Hub doesn't do, it doesn't go after the streaming. If you have a streaming, if you have an application that already has an streaming ready and working, the Event Hub doesn't go after it. The Event Hub needs that one application inserts the data inside the Event Hub. So the Event Hub needs one application to get your source streaming and insert the data inside the streaming. Why? Why? Because on a first point of view, it may appear a lack of an important feature. Maybe today is a lack of important feature. Maybe it may not be even for too long a lack of an important feature. But the point is, Event Hub, the creation of Event Hub was thought to support your applications, the applications that you own and you are creating. So your applications would be able to send events to Event Hub. Your applications would be able to directly send events to Event Hub. Uh, it was not made for existing streamings, and streaming that is already there, ready. Event Hub was not made for that. It doesn't mean we can't make it work for that, but not by itself. And what's the challenge that I'm talking about? I'm talking about that today, nowadays in the global world, we have many public streamings available. We have information about transport. There is even a format specified for many cities, countries, a transport provider to provide the information on a GPS level to track bus routes inside cities, for example. We have social media information from Meetup, from Twitter, and we have many more streaming information available on the internet. They are there. We can just get the streaming. So the point is, we already have the streaming ready. Transport, Meetup, Twitter. Maybe this scenario maybe not have been sought when Event Hub was created. But now we have this scenario where we have the streamings already defined. And on the other side, we have Event Hub, and the Event Hub is waiting the applications to input the data inside the Event Hub. So what do we need? We need a middleman. We need a small apps, a middleman that will read the streaming, will continuously read the streaming, and input the streaming inside Event Hub. So we need a middleman to handle the association between an existing streaming open on the internet and the Event Hub. Once we find a streaming on the internet, doesn't mean that we can, oh, let's create an Event Hub here on Azure and it will handle that streaming. No, you need a middleman. You need an application to handle that. Is a difficult application to do? No, it's something easy. I saw some people solving this problem of middleman with some Python script. From yesterday to today, I built this middleman for the demonstration that I'm making today. I built this in .NET Core from yesterday to today. I can publish this to a SaaS app, a SaaS application in Azure, and leave it running there if I would like. For now, it's running on my machine. But I could publish it to Azure and leave it running as a SaaS application on Azure. There are some possibilities. This one I have not tested yet about using Logic Apps or Power Automate to be this middleman. But the point is we need a middleman to link the existing streamings to Event Hub. Cool. All these are cool information. But isn't this session about Power BI? Why I'm talking so much about Event Hub? Isn't this session about Power BI? In Power BI, how this works in Power BI when we want to receive a set of real-time data in Power BI. We create one object that is called streaming dataset in the portal. When we create a streaming dataset in the portal in Power BI, Power BI creates an API to receive data. So we create a streaming dataset, we define the schema of this dataset, and Power BI creates an API to receive the data from this streaming to this streaming dataset. And it's our application task to send the data to Power BI. So it's the same. It's absolutely the same. We define a data set, but Power BI will open an API for us and will be waiting to receive the data. Power BI will not go after an existing streaming. Will not go after an existing streaming. The data needs to arrive to Power BI. So the same explanation that I just did for Event Hub also fits for Power BI. We just saw this image before, but now we are seeing this related to Power BI. It's the same. We have existing streams in one side, we have Power BI in the other side, and we can create middlemen to read the existing streaming and send the data to Power BI. So these middlemen can make the reading of the data and send to Power BI. But there is another option, is the option that continue using Event Hub. The middleman continues sending the data to Event Hub, but the Event Hub will be sending the data to Power BI. In this case, Power BI will consume the data from Event Hub, not from the application. There are some advantages and disadvantages. Let's talk about both. We'll talk about both advantages and disadvantages. But the truth is, I'm simplifying a bit this diagram. This diagram is a bit simplified because in this relation, what happens in this relation between Event Hub and Power BI is that this relation is not directly in the middle. There will be the string analytics. The string analytics in Azure will receive the information from Event Hub, will be able to summarize the information and then define destinations that may be Power BI destinations, Power BI streaming datasets. So, choices that we have. We can choose between calling the Power BI API using a middleman that you call directly the Power BI API, or using a middleman that will call the Event Hub API. How do we decide that? We usually can choose Power BI when we are dealing with relational solutions. Why? Because when we are dealing with relational solutions and our purpose is only to have a real-time view of the relational solution, so the data is already getting into a relational database. The data is already being saved. It's like the idea of the batch layer of a Lambda architecture is already there. Is the relational database. So we only need a speed layer, a layer that will receive the real-time data and show what's happening now and don't care about the future of this data, can drop the data later. It's not important. This data could be dropped later. So there would not be a problem if you call directly the Power BI API on this situation. But on other situations, when we have an external streaming that is not under our control, and usually is a big data streaming that is not under our control, and we need to get this streaming and see real-time data for this streaming, probably we would like to use Event Hub. Because Power BI, using the Power BI API on this example would be only the speed layer. The idea that show what's happening now and drop the data and release the data, drop the data. You don't need this to keep the data. But if instead of sending the data directly to Power BI API, we send the data to Event Hub using the Event Hub API, then Event Hub can make many decisions in relation to the data. The Event Hub can get this data and store this data in an Azure Blob Storage, for example. Can even store this data in an Azure SQL or many other possibilities. There are many possibilities about where the data will be stored. And Power BI will be the speed layer behind Event Hub. Event Hub will be the first point of injection. Uh, the point of decision here is which one will be our entrance point for the ingestion of the data, Event Hub or Power BI. And if you choose Power BI, we are choosing to ingest in a speed layer where the data will not be kept for so long. But if you choose Event Hub can make many manipulations or now or in the future with our data. So that's the point of decision. And Power BI may be a good choice when we already have the data saved in another place, the relational scenario. But when we don't, the Event Hub may be a better solution. So Power BI is only a speed layer, while Event Hub can handle both layers. We'll distribute the data to Power BI as a speed layer, and we'll send the data to a batch layer to store and process the data in more details. So, in relation to Power BI, when we use relational solutions, the data is more ready to Power BI. This makes things easier to Power BI. But when we are ingesting a streaming out of our control, the data may need a lot of analysis and summarizing, grouping, and so on. And to make this in a real-time data set is not so easy. It's possible, but not so easy. So maybe we could get the help of Event Hub for this kind of analysis. I already mentioned that the entry point of Power BI for streaming datasets, entry point of Power BI for real-time data are the streaming datasets. The streaming datasets are the entry point. When we go to Power BI and try to create a streaming dataset, we receive these three options. You can create a streaming dataset with an API. We can use Azure Stream, or you can use PubNub. What are the three options? That I was talking about two of them right now. The API option is that you will create the dataset inside Power BI, and you need to create a middleman that will ingest data to this dataset. You need to create an application that will ingest the data directly to the Power BI dataset using this streaming API. On the other hand, if you choose to get the data from Event Hub, then you can use Azure Stream. Then Power BI will be linked not with Event Hub. Power BI will be linked with Stream Analytics. Event Hub is only, think about Event Hub as a receptionist, a very efficient receptionist that don't let anyone give up and go back. Don't lose events. It's a very efficient receptionist. So it directs who arrives to the string analytics, and the string analytics can make further analysis and redirect the content to many outputs. This option can't be built from inside Power BI portal. We can't build this option inside the Power BI portal. We need to go to the Azure portal, String Analytics, to build this option. Inside the Power BI portal, we can't build that. Now, at this moment, we can. PubNub is a commercial API service that is becoming very famous and enable us to manage streaming through APIs. It's a commercial service, and we can link Power BI with this service called PubNub. And if we are linking with String Analytics, this is how a screen of String Analytics works. In String Analytics, we define the outputs. Mind the amount of outputs that String Analytics can use. Once the data is received from Event Hub, our receptionist, String Analytics can deliver the information to many different destinations. And there in the middle, one of the destinations is Power BI. That's it. So from the Azure portal on String Analytics, we can define the Power BI dataset. We will define the Power BI dataset from the Azure portal. And when we complete the string analytics configuration, the string analytics will have an input. The input is coming from Event Hub. And the string analytics can have many outputs. On this example, this image, I'm showing only one output, but string analytics is able to have many outputs. And what links the input with the output is a query. You are seeing a query. We make a query over the input, and mind that we are using a select into in the middle of this query. The query has a select into, and the into there is the name of the output. So we are selecting from the input and ingesting this data into the output with a query. It appears to be a simple SQL query, but it's not so simple. It's made to be very similar to SQL, but string analytics has its own SQL language. There are features on the string analytics SQL language that we don't find on a regular SQL database. So this is a specific language related to string analytics. Let's make a demonstration before some last words on the slide. We are seeing the report here, the same report that I was showing before. So I can make a refresh here. Let me close and apply again. Like I mentioned before, my refresh of the reports are not so good as I would like. See, it's changing the number. It's changing the number of the attendees, and from time to time change the events with the most number of attendees. But the concentration is North Europe, but the east side of North Europe, almost entire Europe, and some other spread around the world in many different places around the world. So this is our real-time report. We have a report, but here we have a real-time data set as well. Here you see Meetup, a real-time data set. Mind the symbol of real-time on the data set. Other data sets don't use this symbol. This means that data set is a real-time data set. I don't need premium. I don't need not even premium per user to use this feature. So I can use a streaming dataset. And when I use a streaming dataset, I see exactly the option that we saw. I can create a dataset in Power BI. And if I created the dataset in Power BI, I will need to define the dataset, define the dataset name, define the dataset field by field, and then I will receive an API and I'll need to call an API for this definition. Okay. Now in the Azure portal, inside the Azure portal, what do we have here? Let's open the a clean page with the portal. So I can go into my resource group called ingestion. My resource group called ingestion. And I can see here this logic app is lost here. I'm not using it for anything. I can see here that I have an event hub namespace and I have an string analytics. Okay, but we talked a lot about the idea of middleman. Where is my middleman? Where is my middleman reading the API and sending the data to Event Hub? Simple. I left the middleman in my local machine. I had not a really good time to publish it. I could publish it to a SaaS application in Azure, but I didn't manage to publish it. But my middleman is here in Visual Studio Code running on my local machine. I'm making a constant read of the API and sending the data to Log Analytics, sending the information to, Log Analytics, to Event Hub. Sorry for that, sorry for the mistake. What's interesting here on the reading of this API is that the first thought of a developer not used to a streaming scenario would be that, oh, you are reading this in a loop. You are reading this in a loop and ensuring that you are reading this in a loop is not totally true. It's not totally true because what happens here? I use a begin get response. I'm reading the API from the meetup. I use the begin get response to read the API, and you keep getting the response until it reaches the end of the string. And when it will reach the end of the string, never, because I'm reading a streaming API. There is no end. So this loop is an infinite loop. So I had to include a stopping Boolean variable. So if I would like to stop this loop, I would need to set this stopping variable to true, so it would stop this loop. And now this happens asynchronous. The asynchronous features of .NET manage multi-threads for me. How this happens asynchronous. So I need to make another loop just to not get out this method until I decide to change the stopping flag. If I decide to change the stopping flag, then the reading will stop. But it's not really a loop with many network calls, something like give me more, give me more, give me more. No, it's not like that. It's a single API call that never ends. And we keep reading the partial result of the API calls in the middle and sending to Event Hub. I have another class here that sends the data to Event Hub. The program CS is making the middle task. I don't like too much this middleman idea because it's too easy for a developer to make a mistake on this middleman development and lose events, make things slower than it could be, and things like that. It's too easy for a developer to mistaken develop this middleman. Don't like the middleman idea, but that's how we have what we have today. And if later we can automate more the middleman, that will be better. So the middleman is sending the information to my event hub here, so we can see the amount of messages received by the event hub. This is on the last hour, reaching almost peaks of 100 messages. The messages are how in JSON. Luckily, the messages are how in JSON. There are no restriction for the format of the message, really. I could be sending anything on the message. There is not a real restriction for the format of the message. But the fact that the messages are in JSON makes things way easier. I have an Event Hub namespace, and a connection is defined to the namespace using an endpoint connection. And inside the Event Hub namespace, I have the Event Hub itself. It's this guy, bus data, that is receiving the message. This guy is really receiving the message. Inside the Event Hub namespace, which controls the connection from applications, what will be our middleman to the Event Hub. And we have many Event Hubs. I have only one Event Hub in this case. And besides the Event Hub, I have the String Analytics. String Analytics is the guy. It's called a String Analytics job. Mind this, it's called String Analytics job. Is the guy that is receiving the data from the input and sending the data to the output defined here. So we have an output defined here. We are receiving the data from the input and sending the data to this output from Event Hub to Power BI. And we are doing that using this query. This query that is using what is called a tumbling window. Manipulating time in string analytics is something basic, fundamental. So string analytics has many functions to manipulating time and making time windows on the events and manipulating the events using time windows. So tumbling window is one example of one of these functions that existed here on the string analytics SQL and don't exist in SQL Server itself. So I created a meetup report. I created this meetup report that you saw before, and one detail that is interesting in relation to this meetup report is that just some time ago, I would say some months, maybe some of you may remind that some months ago, we were not able to create a report in the portal. And manipulating a streaming data set in the Power BI desktop is at least very difficult. And you may lose the real-time idea. So it needs to be manipulated on the portal. But just a few months ago, we had not the ability to create a report in the portal, really. We are more about creating the report in the desktop and only publish it and see on the portal. So from that time, when we couldn't create the report in the portal, what rest for us was dashboards. We could create dashboards. We could create dashboards and define tiles on the dashboards and so on. Let me delete this tile. style is wrong. But the problem of creating dashboards, I can create dashboards at the tile here and say I want to create a tile from a custom streaming data. Good. And what data? My data set is called Meetup. Good. And what data you will use? I have a few visualization options, very few visualization options. I don't have the full aggregation features that I have in a regular report. I don't have that. I don't have the full aggregation features of a regular report. I only have the visualization, this visualization option. This makes things very limited. I think I even found some videos on YouTube from this time when it was more difficult to create a report in the portal and the streaming dataset was restricted to these visualization types. And
Just a
this
heads up
can,
about the time, Dennis. We are left with
yes,
about 4 minutes.
4 minutes, 4 minutes, okay. So um, the point is, this can lead to the situation where one single output is not enough. We need to make many outputs, because sometimes we need to send the information aggregated to Power BI. Let me make an example here. I can't add the output with the string analytics running, so I need to stop string analytics and pray that I manage to do that in 4 minutes. So I'm stopping string analytics and preparing to add new outputs once string analytics stops. Once it stops, my dataset is there. The streaming dataset is there, but it will not be being fed. String analytics will not be feeding the dataset. So it stopped. I can add a new Power BI output. And I need to define the workspace for my output. I'm using this Synapse demo workspace. It's fine. And I will specify the name of the dataset. I can have many tables on the same dataset. So I can use the same name of the dataset, which is the dataset is Meetup. But I can create a new name of table. RSVP meetings was on one of the tables. I'll call this table as total attendees. Total attendees. Okay. I need to authorize with Power BI and I need to make a login on the Power BI portal with the correct password. So I'm authorized. I will specify the output alias, and the output alias will be the same. Total attendees, save. It's adding the output. So now I have 2 outputs on my string analytics job. So I successfully included the outputs. Now I'll get back to the query. I have my initial query that is feeding one of the outputs, RSVP meetings, and I will get another one. I'll get another one, very simple, that I will make a select count star as attendees from into my output, total attendees from my input. Meetup data. Let's specify what I'm quoting. I don't remember the let me see if it's system dot timestamp will work. No. I use event ID over event ID I'm sorry that I'm missing some details about the query, but just to complete this example, group by event ID will at least give us an example of the count into total attendees, and I include events ID in the output. It's asking for a temporal window. It's requesting a temporal window to be sure to not count everything. But the main part of this example that I'm showing is that I can create a second output. I just created a second output, and I will start a string analytics job. Let's leave the job starting. I'll get back to the PowerPoint. Now I have two outputs. I'll just leave the last words. The Azure services needs to be on the same Power BI tenant. This is a limitation. For example, some people sometimes create a Power BI account and the Azure account in different moments and don't realize they are in different tenants. The Azure services needs to be on the same Power BI tenant for this to work. Even me, I have some problems with tenants in relation to this. The middleman is an empty spot, not in the empty spot, an empty spot. I'm mistaken the English here. Just a typing mistake. So the middleman is an empty spot to be filled. I mean, it's an opportunity. Nowadays, we have to develop something, to develop a .NET application, a Python application to fix this middleman. And there will be more news about the streaming will arrive very soon. Sorry by the delay, I'm a bit delayed.
Yeah, a few minutes indeed, yes. You still have for long?
Sorry for that. No. It was already to be finished. I was intended to show a second table inside the dataset.
Okay.
But it appears it didn't work so well because there was a problem on the JSON. It's complaining of a problem on the JSON here that I would need to check later. There is no time to check during the session. Here, it's complaining about this problem. But anyway, the idea is that we can have multiple outputs to Power BI, and these multiple outputs can send the data aggregated to Power BI. This is the summary about what we saw. So I leave my contacts. It will be a pleasure to get in touch, to connect. I hope you have liked the session. I hope you have got interested by real-time data inside Power BI, and soon we may have some more new features in this area. And it will be a pleasure to connect. Thank you very much for the presence of everyone.
Thank you very much for you for presenting. It was quite interesting. So complex indeed, but very interesting. I think it definitely requires some knowledge of Azure to be able to manipulate all those technical things in the cloud. Great.
It requires some beginning knowledge on Azure, but once you get a presentation like this one, it's also easy to find a step-by-step guide on the Event Hub and String Analytics. But to build the entire scenario, you will touch knowledge of different areas. For example, I had to develop the middleman in .NET. There are people who develop it in Python. You need to touch many different areas to achieve the final result of the real-time data in Power BI.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Very good. Well, it seems we don't have questions, but we have messages of thank you. Definitely, it was quite interesting to see all the development needed for streaming analytics. I think it's an interesting topic to have real-time data showing up in Power BI. Very good.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I hope everyone liked it, and I'm available for any questions. Send me an email, connect on LinkedIn. It will be a pleasure to connect. Thank you very much.
All right.
Bye.
Very good.
Have a good
Thank you very much to
Saturday.
everybody. And thank you, Dennis. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye.